The interrogation room grew colder as Krixta began describing the most disturbing part of the battle. Commander Zethkai noticed that the arachnoid's multiple eyes had stopped moving around the room and now stared directly at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. On the second day, "We thought we finally understood how to fight the humans," Krixta said. "Our generals decided to target their leaders. Kill the commanders and the human resistance would collapse like any normal military force. We had identified several key human officers through intercepted communications, and Sergeant Ben Foster seemed to be coordinating attacks in the northern sector. The coalition strategy was logical and had worked on every other species they had conquered. Remove the command structure and ordinary soldiers would surrender or flee in panic. Most species relied on strict hierarchies where orders flowed down from generals to colonels to captains and finally to regular troops. Cut off the head and the body would die. Sergeant Foster was leading a squad of 12 humans in attacks against our supply convoys," Krixta continued. "Our snipers managed to wound him seriously with a plasma rifle shot to the chest. We expected his squad to retreat and call for medical support. Instead, something incredible happened. What the coalition forces witnessed next challenged everything they knew about military psychology and combat behavior. Instead of falling apart when their leader was injured, Sergeant Foster's squad became more dangerous than before. Their attack patterns became more aggressive, their tactics more creative, and their effectiveness doubled in a matter of minutes. The human female soldier who took over Foster's position was named Corporal Janet Mills," Krixta said. "She had been quiet and followed orders without question when Foster was healthy. But the moment he was wounded, she transformed into something terrifying. She began giving orders with absolute confidence, and the other humans obeyed her immediately. The wounded Sergeant Foster had crawled to cover behind a destroyed coalition vehicle, bleeding badly but still conscious. Instead of weakening his squad, his injury seemed to trigger some kind of protective instinct in the other humans that made them fight with desperate fury. They moved to shield Foster from further harm while simultaneously launching more aggressive attacks against coalition positions. Private Kate Sullivan was calculating artillery coordinates while making jokes with her squad mates," Krixta continued. "She was under heavy plasma fire from 3 different directions, but she acted like she was having a normal conversation with friends. Her calculations destroyed 2 of our heavy weapons positions and saved Foster's life. And she did it all while laughing at something another human had said on the radio." Commander Zethkai struggled to understand this behavior. In every other species, soldiers under extreme stress became focused and serious. Fear and adrenaline made them quiet and careful, but humans seemed to become more social and more cooperative when they were in the most danger. "We intercepted their communications throughout the battle," Krixta said. "We expected to hear panic, fear, or desperation. Instead, we heard humans encouraging each other, sharing information and making plans together. Even when they were dying, they used their last words to help their teammates. The coalition's psychological warfare specialists had prepared for human fear, anger, and despair. They had weapons designed to cause panic and confusion in enemy forces. But nothing in their arsenal was designed to counter an enemy that became stronger and more unified when faced with impossible odds. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Brooks was killed by one of our orbital strikes on the 3rd day," Krixta continued. "He was the highest-ranking human military officer in the settlement, and our intelligence said his death would cripple human resistance. We were wrong again. When Lieutenant Colonel Brooks died, the human forces did not collapse into chaos as expected. Instead, they seamlessly reorganized themselves without any apparent confusion or delay. Captain Rodriguez automatically took command of Brooks's units while maintaining control of her own forces. Other human officers adjusted their responsibilities to fill gaps in the command structure. It was like watching a living organism heal itself," Krixta said quietly. "When we damaged one part, the other parts immediately adapted to compensate. There was no power struggle, no confusion about who was in charge, no breakdown in communication. The humans just continued fighting as if nothing had happened. The most disturbing discovery came when coalition intelligence analyzed the human reorganization. There had been no formal succession planning or written orders about command changes. The humans simply knew instinctively who should take over which responsibilities when their leaders were killed or wounded. We realized that every human soldier could think and lead when necessary," Krixta continued. In our military forces, ordinary soldiers follow orders and wait for commanders to make decisions. Human soldiers make their own decisions constantly and only need officers to coordinate large-scale operations. This decentralized command structure made the humans almost impossible to defeat through traditional military tactics. Destroying command posts had no effect because every human unit could operate independently. Cutting communication lines was useless because human soldiers anticipated what their teammates would do without needing to talk to them. The most frightening example happened in the industrial sector, Krixta said. A group of human teenagers, some of them only 16 or 17 years old, found themselves cut off from adult supervision when coalition forces overran their area. Instead of hiding or trying to escape, they organized their own military unit. Maya Patel, who was barely 18 years old, took command of 23 teenage humans and began conducting military operations against coalition forces. These young humans had no formal military training, but they fought with the same tactical skill and fearless aggression as veteran soldiers. Patel's group built weapons from industrial equipment, set up communication networks using civilian radios, and established supply lines to support their operations, Krixta continued. They were more effective than some of our professional military units, and they were just children who had learned everything from watching the adult humans fight. Commander Zethkai felt a chill run through his entire body. Children were fighting your trained soldiers? Not just fighting, Krixta replied. Winning. Patel's teenagers destroyed 6 coalition vehicles, captured an entire Zenthrax communication post, and rescued 12 adult human prisoners from our detention facility. They did all of this in less than 8 hours, and they never lost a single member of their group. The implications were staggering. If human children could match professional coalition soldiers, what were adult humans capable of? The teenagers had shown the same tactical innovation, fearless aggression, and pack cooperation that made adult humans so dangerous. We began to understand that we were not fighting a military force, Krixta said. We were fighting an entire species that was designed for warfare. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest adult, seemed to have an instinctive understanding of tactics, weapons, and combat. The coalition forces had encountered many warrior species during their expansion across the galaxy. The Cathari lived for honor in battle, the Vorthak were naturally aggressive, and the Zenthrax could coordinate attacks with perfect precision. But no species had ever shown the combination of individual creativity, group cooperation, and tactical genius that humans displayed. On the 4th day, we intercepted a conversation between 2 human children who were playing some kind of game, Krixta said. When our translators analyzed their words, we discovered that their game was actually advanced military strategy training. These children were practicing complex battle scenarios that would challenge our best military academies. Commander Zethkai leaned forward in his chair. What kind of game? They called it Capture the Flag, Krixta replied. 2 teams of human children would try to steal an object from the other team's base while protecting their own object. It sounded simple, but when we observed them playing, we saw that they were using real military tactics like flanking maneuvers, diversionary attacks, intelligence gathering, and coordinated assaults. The children had been unconsciously training for warfare their entire lives through games and sports that taught them military skills. Team sports taught them coordination and cooperation. Strategy games taught them planning and tactics. Even their entertainment prepared them to be more effective soldiers. We finally understood why humans smiled when they saw our invasion fleet, Krixta said quietly. They were not afraid because they had been preparing for war since birth. Fighting us was not a terrifying crisis for them. It was what they had been designed to do. The interrogation room had become completely silent, except for the sound of Krixta's breathing. Commander Zethkai sat frozen in his chair as the full implications of the arachnoid's testimony became clear. The Battle of New Denver was not just a military defeat. It was the moment when the galaxy learned that humanity was not a primitive species to be conquered, but a nightmare that had been sleeping among the stars. General Korthvar ordered an immediate retreat after Colonel Mitchell's demonstration, Krixta said quietly. But even our withdrawal became a lesson in human tactical superiority. They allowed us to leave, but they made sure we understood that our escape was happening because they permitted it, not because we had earned it. The coalition forces had expected their retreat to be harassed by human fighters trying to inflict maximum casualties on the fleeing aliens. Instead, the humans provided safe corridors for coalition withdrawal and even offered medical assistance to wounded enemy soldiers. This mercy was more terrifying than any attack could have been. The humans gave us supplies for the journey back to our ships, Krixta continued. Food, medical equipment, and repair materials for our damaged vehicles. Colonel Mitchell personally wished General Korthvar a safe journey home and said he hoped there would be no need for future conflicts between humans and the coalition. But every act of human kindness carried an unspoken message. The same hands that offered medical aid could build weapons of mass destruction. The same minds that calculated supply requirements for enemy retreat could plan the complete annihilation of entire worlds. Humans were showing coalition forces that they controlled every aspect of the conflict, including how it would end. During our withdrawal, I overheard a conversation between two human children, Krixta said. They were discussing the battle like adults would discuss a business meeting. One of them said that the coalition forces had been good practice for the human defenders, but that real military forces from Earth would have ended the fight in 6 hours instead of 5 days. Commander Zethkai felt sick as he realized what this meant. The colonists of New Denver, who had just destroyed the largest coalition military force in history, were considered amateur fighters by human standards. If farmers and miners could devastate professional alien armies, what could Earth's actual military accomplish? The most horrifying discovery came when we analyzed coalition communications during the battle, Krixta continued. Our intelligence services had been monitoring human radio transmissions for years before the invasion. We thought we understood human military capabilities based on their colonial defense forces and merchant marine escorts. The coalition had observed human military exercises, studied their weapons technology, and analyzed their tactical doctrines. Every piece of intelligence suggested that humans were a minor threat with limited capabilities and primitive strategies. The invasion of New Denver had been planned based on this flawed understanding. We learned that human colonial militias, like the New Denver Defenders, were classified as Level 1 forces in human military organization, Krixta said. They were designed for basic security operations and disaster response, not serious military conflict. Earth's actual combat forces were classified as Level 7 units with capabilities we cannot even imagine. The revelation destroyed every assumption the coalition had made about human military power. If Level 1 forces could annihilate coalition armies, what would Level 7 forces do to entire coalition fleets? The mathematics of the situation were terrifying to contemplate. Major Trevor Hayes, who commanded the New Denver security forces, mentioned casually during the retreat that Earth's professional military was somewhat more experienced than colonial defenders, Krixta continued. He said this like he was comparing amateur musicians to professionals, not describing the difference between devastating defeats and complete extinction. Commander Zethkai tried to process the scope of human military power. The coalition controlled hundreds of worlds and commanded millions of soldiers equipped with the galaxy's most advanced weapons. But if humans considered the New Denver Defenders to be barely competent amateurs, then coalition forces might be nothing more than target practice for real human armies. The final message we received from New Denver came 3 days after our retreat, Krixta said. It was a transmission from Admiral Greg Watson on Earth, broadcast on all coalition frequencies so every ship and base would receive it clearly. Admiral Watson's message had been brief and delivered in the same calm, professional tone that all humans seem to use when discussing military matters. He congratulated Colonel Mitchell on the successful completion of what he called a field test of human colonial defense capabilities. Admiral Watson said that Phase 2 of human colonial expansion would begin immediately, Krixta continued. He thanked coalition forces for providing realistic training, scenarios for human defenders, and said that future human colonies would be better prepared for contact with alien civilizations. The message made it clear that the Battle of New Denver had not been a desperate struggle for survival from the human perspective. It had been a training exercise designed to test their defensive strategies against real alien forces. Coalition armies had been unwitting participants in a human military experiment. The Admiral also mentioned that Earth's deep space monitoring systems had detected coalition fleet movements months before the invasion began, Krixta said. The humans had known we were coming and had time to prepare whatever response they felt was appropriate. This revelation was perhaps the most disturbing of all. Humans had allowed the Coalition to attack New Denver because they wanted to study alien military capabilities and test their own defenses under realistic conditions. 50,000 Coalition soldiers had died as part of a human research project. Admiral Watson concluded his message with an invitation, Krixta said quietly. He offered to establish diplomatic relations with the Coalition based on mutual respect and non-interference. He said that humans preferred peaceful coexistence, but would respond appropriately to any future aggressive actions. The offer of diplomacy was clearly a warning, disguised as friendly outreach. Humans were giving the Coalition one opportunity to avoid further conflict. The alternative to peaceful coexistence was left unstated, but perfectly clear to everyone who had witnessed the Battle of New Denver. When we returned to Coalition space, emergency sessions were called on every member world, Krixta continued. Military leaders who had been planning conquest campaigns for decades suddenly began discussing defensive strategies. Species that had been enemies for centuries started forming alliances against the human threat. The galaxy's political landscape had changed overnight. Traditional rivalries and territorial disputes became insignificant when faced with the possibility of human expansion. Coalition members realized that their only hope for survival lay in presenting a united front against humanity. The Cathari High Command canceled all military operations and recalled their fleets to defend the homeworld, Krixta said. The Zenthrax Collective began converting industrial facilities to produce defensive weapons. The Vorthak Empire started building fortifications around every populated system. Even species that had never cooperated before began sharing intelligence and military resources. The proud Cathari offered their air superiority technology to former enemies. The secretive Zenthrax shared their communication networks with other species. The aggressive Vorthak provided their shield generators to protect non-military worlds. But we all know that these preparations are meaningless, Krixta said, and its multiple eyes focused on Commander Zethkai with terrifying intensity. The humans showed us footage of their own history. We saw what they do to enemies who threaten their existence. No defensive measure we can create will stop them if they decide we are too dangerous to allow survival. Commander Zethkai understood the hopelessness of the Coalition's situation. Humans had demonstrated tactical superiority, technological adaptability, and psychological warfare capabilities that exceeded anything in galactic history. They had also shown a willingness to use whatever level of force was necessary to achieve their objectives. The worst part is that we brought this on ourselves, Krixta said quietly. Before the Battle of New Denver, humans were content to establish small colonies and trade peacefully with other species. We could have coexisted with them for centuries without conflict. But we attacked them first, and now they know we see them as enemies. The Coalition had created the very threat they now feared. By attacking New Denver, they had forced humans to reveal their true capabilities and had given them reason to view alien species as potential dangers. The galaxy would never be safe from humanity again. Admiral Watson's final words still echo in my nightmares, Krixta said. He said that human colonies would continue expanding across the galaxy, and that any species that interfered with this expansion would discover why humans had never been conquered by any force in their planet's history. The message was clear. Humanity was moving into the galaxy permanently, and they would eliminate any obstacle to their expansion. Species could choose to coexist peacefully or they could choose to be destroyed, but they could not choose to stop human colonization. Krixta's multiple eyes had become completely still now, focused on something that Commander Zethkai could not see. The arachnoid's mandibles clicked together slowly as it prepared to tell the most horrifying part of the story. By the 5th day, our forces were desperate, Krixta said quietly. We had lost over 30,000 soldiers and most of our heavy equipment. General Korthfer ordered a final assault using every remaining unit we had. But the humans were ready for us, and they showed us something that still gives me nightmares. The Coalition's final attack had been their last hope for victory. They concentrated all remaining forces into one massive assault aimed at the center of New Denver, hoping to overwhelm the human defenders through sheer numbers. The plan was simple. Advance on all fronts simultaneously and crush human resistance before they could adapt to the new strategy. Colonel Sam Mitchell was the human commander who met our final assault, Krixta continued. He was a calm, quiet man who spoke in a soft voice and seemed very reasonable. When our forces surrounded his position, he contacted General Korthvar on an open radio channel and offered to discuss surrender terms. Commander Zethkai nodded. This sounded more like what coalition leaders expected from defeated enemies. So the humans were finally ready to give up? That is what we thought, Krixta replied, but its voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Colonel Mitchell invited General Korthvar to meet him at the town center for formal surrender negotiations. He said he wanted to avoid any more unnecessary death and suffering. The meeting had been arranged for noon on the 5th day, in the main square where the human colony had been founded. General Korthvar brought a full honor guard and media crews to record the historic surrender of the first human colony to coalition forces. Victory celebrations were already being planned on the coalition homeworlds. When General Korthvar arrived at the meeting location, Colonel Mitchell was waiting with a small group of human officers, Krixta said. They had set up a simple table with chairs and had prepared documents for the surrender ceremony. Everything looked normal and proper, but Colonel Mitchell had not invited the general to discuss surrender. Instead, he had prepared a demonstration that would break coalition morale completely and forever. The humans had been studying coalition psychology for decades, and Mitchell knew exactly how to destroy enemy will to fight. Colonel Mitchell began by showing General Korthvar several captured coalition soldiers. Krixta continued. These were prisoners who had been taken during the battle, and they appeared to be healthy and well treated. The general was pleased to see that humans followed proper prisoner treatment protocols. The captured soldiers told General Korthvar that the humans had given them food, medical care, and comfortable places to sleep. They had not been tortured or abused in any way. Some of them even said the human guards had been kind and friendly to them. Then Colonel Mitchell said something that confused us, Krixta said. He told General Korthvar that humans wanted to show coalition forces what they were truly capable of. He said the battle so far had been humans fighting carefully to minimize casualties on both sides. Commander Zethkai felt his blood grow cold. Minimize casualties? Yes, Krixta replied. Colonel Mitchell explained that humans had been holding back their full capabilities because they wanted to give coalition forces a chance to surrender honorably. He said that human military doctrine included something called escalation management that was designed to end conflicts with the least possible destruction. The revelation was impossible to believe. Coalition forces had suffered devastating losses and faced tactical innovations they had never seen before, but the humans claimed they had been fighting gently. If this was human restraint, what would human aggression look like? Colonel Mitchell then showed us footage from something called the Human Historical Combat Archive, Krixta said, and every one of its eyes dilated with remembered horror. He said he wanted coalition commanders to understand what humans did when they fought each other, so we would know what to expect if the war continued. The footage began with battles from human history, starting with ancient conflicts using primitive weapons and progressing through increasingly advanced and destructive wars. Coalition officers watched in growing shock as humans demonstrated levels of violence and destruction that surpassed anything seen in galactic history. The images showed human cities, completely destroyed by their own weapons, Krixta continued. Millions of humans dead in single conflicts that lasted for years. Weapons that could kill every living thing across enormous areas. Technologies designed specifically to cause maximum suffering to enemy populations. General Korthvar and his staff watched footage of human bombardments that turned entire cities into rubble, chemical weapons that killed indiscriminately, and battles where millions of humans died for control of small pieces of land. The coalition had never seen warfare conducted with such systematic brutality and technological efficiency. But the most terrifying part was not the weapons or the destruction, Krixta said quietly. It was the human faces in the footage. They looked exactly like Colonel Mitchell and the other humans in New Denver. Calm, reasonable people who discussed mass destruction like they were planning farming schedules. The humans in the historical footage spoke about killing millions of their own species in the same quiet, matter-of-fact voices that Colonel Mitchell used to discuss surrender terms. There was no anger, no hatred, no emotional excitement. Just professional soldiers doing their jobs with deadly efficiency. Colonel Mitchell paused the footage and explained that these were examples of humans fighting other humans, Krixta continued. He said that when humans fought their own species, they had to use their full capabilities because other humans would understand and counter any restrained tactics. The implication was clear and terrifying. Humans had developed their most destructive weapons and tactics for use against other humans who were just as smart, adaptable, and dangerous as themselves. What they had shown coalition forces was only a tiny fraction of their true military potential. Then Captain Rodriguez brought out a group of coalition prisoners who had been captured. Earlier in the battle, Krixta said. She made them watch the same historical footage that we had just seen. I watched their faces change as they realized what humans were capable of when they stopped holding back. The captured coalition soldiers had been proud warriors from various species, confident in their own military traditions and fighting abilities. But as they watched human armies systematically destroy entire civilizations with cold professional efficiency, that confidence crumbled into pure terror. A Cathari pilot broke down completely when he saw footage of human aerial bombardments. Krixta continued. He was from a warrior culture that prized courage above all else. But he began sobbing like a child when he understood what human pilots could do to his homeworld. A Zenthrax drone. Commander had disconnected from the hive mind completely rather than share the knowledge of human capabilities with other Zenthrax. The psychological trauma was so severe that the drone chose isolation over the communal consciousness that defined its species. Captain Rodriguez spoke very calmly to the prisoners, Krixta said. She explained that the footage showed how humans fought when they were serious about winning. She said that everything we had experienced in New Denver was just humans being polite to foreign visitors. The psychological warfare was perfect and complete. The coalition prisoners were not just physically defeated but mentally broken by the realization of what they faced. They understood that humanity possessed the capability and willingness to exterminate entire species if they chose to do so. Colonel Mitchell then made his final offer, Krixta said. He told General Korthvar that humans were willing to accept coalition surrender and allow all remaining forces to return home safely. He said this was humanity's preferred outcome because they did not want to demonstrate their serious military capabilities. The offer was presented as mercy, but everyone present understood it as the threat it really was. Humans were giving coalition forces one last chance to leave peacefully before they stopped pretending to be a primitive colonial species and revealed themselves as the galaxy's most dangerous predators. General Korthvar asked Colonel Mitchell a question that I will never forget, Krixta said quietly. He asked what would happen if coalition forces refused the surrender offer and continued fighting. Colonel Mitchell had smiled the same calm, friendly smile that humans had shown throughout the entire battle. Then he said words that haunted every coalition survivor. Then you will discover why humans are the only known species that achieved sentience while remaining apex predators. The white walls of the interrogation room were cold and clean. Commander Zethkai sat behind a metal table, his green reptilian skin reflecting the harsh lights above. His yellow eyes studied the creature sitting across from him with great interest and some fear. The arachnoid named Krixta had 8 legs that tapped nervously on the floor, making small clicking sounds that echoed in the quiet room. Multiple black eyes moved around constantly, never staying still, never looking directly at the commander. For too long, Krixta was the only intelligence officer to survive the Battle of Kepler 442b. Out of 50,000 coalition soldiers who went to take the human colony world of New Denver, fewer than 200 came back alive. Most of those survivors were badly hurt in body and mind. Many could not speak at all about what happened. Krixta was different, though. The spider-like being could talk, even if every word seemed to cause pain. Tell me what happened on New Denver, Commander Zethkai said in his deep voice. Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out. Krixta's mandibles clicked together several times before any words came out. We thought it would be easy, the arachnoid whispered. The intelligence report said the humans were simple. They had basic weapons and no real army. Just 8,000 colonists living on a farming world. Our general said we would win in 3 days. The coalition had sent their best forces to New Denver. There were Vorthak shock troops with their plasma weapons and heavy armor, Cathari air forces with their fast fighters and deadly pilots, Zenthrax ground units that moved like one mind across the battlefield, arachnoid intelligence teams to gather information and find weak spots in human defenses. It should have been more than enough to defeat a small human colony. What was the first sign that something was wrong? Zethkai asked, leaning forward in his chair. Krixta's eyes all focused on the table between them. The landing, the creature said quietly. We expected the humans to run when our ships appeared in their sky. Instead, they came out of their buildings and looked up at us. They were not afraid. Some of them were pointing and talking to each other like they were excited to see us. The first wave of coalition forces had landed in the main settlement area, expecting to find panic and chaos among the human population. Instead, they found humans going about their daily work. Children played in the streets while adults continued their jobs. Nobody ran or hid. Nobody seemed worried about the massive alien warships floating above their heads. Our psychological warfare specialists said this was normal. Krixta continued. They said humans were probably too stupid to understand the danger they were in. The specialists said humans would surrender quickly once we showed them our superior weapons. Commander Zethkai nodded. This matched what coalition leaders had believed about humans for years. The species seemed primitive compared to the great civilizations of the galaxy. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel and had very few colony worlds. Their technology was basic and their military forces were small. Most coalition species looked at humans the way they might look at clever animals that had learned to use tools. When did the fighting start? Zethkai asked. General Korthvar ordered a demonstration, Krixta said, and all 8 legs began tapping faster on the floor. He wanted to show the humans what our plasma cannons could do. He picked an empty building on the edge of town and destroyed it completely. The humans watched the whole thing. Then something strange happened. The arachnoid paused and seemed to be gathering courage to continue speaking. After our plasma cannon turned their building into dust and fire, the humans started laughing. Not all of them, but many of them. They looked at each other and smiled like they had just seen something funny. Some of them even clapped their hands together. Commander Zethkai felt a chill run down his spine. They clapped? Yes, Krixta whispered. They clapped like we had just given them entertainment. Then one of them, a male with brown hair, walked forward. He was wearing simple work clothes and had dirt on his hands like he had been farming. He came right up to General Korthvar and said something in their language. What did he say? Our translators told us later. The human said, "Nice shot. Is that the best you can do?" Then he smiled at the general. Not a scared smile or a fake smile, a real smile, like he was genuinely happy to meet us. The room fell silent except for the constant clicking of Krixta's legs on the floor. Commander Zethkai tried to imagine the scene. A primitive human farmer walking up to one of the coalition's most feared generals and challenging him with a smile. It should have been impossible. General Korthvar was angry, Krixta continued. He ordered the human to be captured for questioning. That was when everything went wrong. The human did not try to run. Instead, he put his hands up in surrender and kept smiling. But when our soldiers got close to him, other humans started moving. Moving how? Like they had been waiting for this moment their whole lives. Like they had practiced this exact situation 1,000 times. The human female standing near the captured male pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Suddenly, our communication systems went quiet. All of them. Every radio, every scanner, every connection to our ships above. Krixta's multiple eyes darted around the room again before focusing back on the table. Then the explosion started. Not random explosions, but perfectly timed ones. Buildings we thought were empty turned out to be full of humans with weapons. Roads we thought were safe had hidden traps that destroyed our vehicles. The entire settlement turned into a killing field in less than 60 seconds. But surely your superior numbers and weapons gave you an advantage, Zethkai said, though he was beginning to doubt his own words. That is what we thought too, Krixta replied. But the humans fought like nothing we had ever seen before. When Lieutenant Jake Morrison got shot in the shoulder by one of our plasma rifles, he just looked at the wound and laughed. Then he picked up the weapon of a dead Cathari soldier and started using it against us. He was bleeding and should have been in terrible pain, but he moved like the injury made him stronger instead of weaker. The arachnoid's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Captain Lisa Rodriguez was even worse. She lost 3 fingers to shrapnel from one of our grenades. She looked at her damaged hand, wrapped it in a piece of cloth, and then started throwing our own grenades back at us. She threw them with her injured hand like the pain meant nothing to her. Commander Zethkai felt his blood running cold as he listened to these impossible stories. No species in the galaxy fought through injuries like that. Pain was nature's way of telling a creature to stop fighting and find safety. Only humans seemed to ignore this basic survival instinct. The worst part, Krixta said, was that they never stopped smiling. Commander Zethkai watched Krixta carefully as the arachnoid continued the terrible story. The spider-like being had stopped clicking its legs on the floor, but now its multiple eyes moved even faster, as if seeing the battle happen again in its memory. After the first attack failed, General Korthvar was furious, Krixta said quietly. He ordered a full assault on the human settlement. We had tanks, aircraft, and 3 full battalions of soldiers. The humans had maybe 800 fighters and simple weapons. It should have been a slaughter. The coalition forces had regrouped quickly after the initial surprise. Their military doctrine was simple and had worked on dozens of worlds before. Overwhelming firepower would break human resistance in a matter of hours. The aliens had advanced plasma weapons, energy shields, and armor that could stop most primitive projectile weapons. What could human farmers and miners possibly do against such technology? The human settlement was spread out across the valley, Krixta continued. There were farms, mines, small towns, and industrial areas all connected by roads. Our tactical computer said it would take 6 hours to secure the entire area if the humans fought back. General Korthvar expected it to take 3 hours at most. But as the coalition forces advanced, they began to notice things that did not make sense. The human buildings were not arranged randomly like most colonial settlements. Every structure seemed to be placed with careful thought. Roads curved in strange ways that made no sense for normal traffic. Open areas between buildings were exactly the right size for military vehicles, but had strange obstacles that would slow down an attacking force. Mayor Alex Carter came on the radio after we started our assault, Krixta said. He spoke in perfect coalition standard language, which surprised us. Most humans barely knew our trade language, but Carter spoke like he had studied our languages for years. He told General Korthvar that New Denver surrendered and asked for a meeting to discuss terms. Commander Zethkai nodded. This sounded more like what the coalition expected from humans. So the battle was over? That is what we thought, Krixta replied, and its mandibles clicked together nervously. General Korthvar agreed to meet with this Mayor Carter, but he was suspicious, so he sent Colonel Vrexhai with a full company of guards to the meeting location. It was a community center in the middle of town, a large building where the humans held social gatherings. The meeting had been set for sunset, which should have given the coalition forces time to secure the entire settlement. But as coalition units moved through New Denver, they discovered that every human building was connected by underground tunnels. What looked like separate targets were actually one large fortress with hidden passages between every section. Colonel Vrexhai arrived at the community center exactly on time. Krixta continued. Mayor Carter was waiting for him inside, sitting at a simple table with papers spread out in front of him. He was an older human with gray hair and calm eyes. He looked like a grandfather, not a military leader. He offered Colonel Vrexhai something called coffee and began discussing surrender terms. But while the colonel was talking with Mayor Carter, human fighters were moving through their tunnel system like a giant underground army. They appeared behind coalition forces, attacked quickly, and then disappeared back into the tunnels before return fire could hurt them. Every time coalition units tried to follow the humans underground, they found that the tunnels were full of traps and dead ends that led nowhere. The coffee was drugged, Krixta said quietly. Not with poison, but with something that made Colonel Vrexhai feel relaxed and sleepy. While he was talking with Mayor Carter, his guards were being picked off one by human snipers. The humans used silenced weapons so the colonel never heard the fighting outside. Commander Zethkai leaned back in his chair. The entire meeting was a trap? The entire settlement was a trap, Krixta replied. We learned later that Mayor Carter had been a military strategist before coming to New Denver. He had fought in several human wars and had studied coalition military tactics for over 20 years. Every building, every road, every tunnel had been designed to kill invading forces. The coalition had fallen into the most basic military trap possible. They had let their enemy choose the battlefield and control the timing of the fight. While they thought they were conquering a farming colony, they were actually walking into a carefully prepared killing ground that had taken years to build. The humans knew exactly what species would be in our invasion force, Krixta continued. They had different tactics ready for each of us. Against the Cathari pilots, they used electronic warfare that confused their navigation systems and made them crash into each other. Against the Zenthrax ground units, they used sonic weapons that disrupted the hive-mind connection and made individual soldiers panic. The psychological warfare was the most disturbing part of the human strategy. They had studied each coalition species and learned exactly what would frighten them most. The honor-obsessed Ketheri were humiliated by guerrilla attacks that made them look cowardly. The logic-driven Zenthrax were driven insane by chaos and unpredictability. The pride-focused Vorthak were enraged by human taunts and insults that made them make stupid tactical decisions. But the worst thing they did was to our wounded, Krixta said, and all of its eyes focused on Commander Zethkai at the same time. When coalition soldiers were injured, human medics would appear and offer medical help. They saved lives and treated wounds with great skill. They were kind and gentle, just like medical personnel should be. That sounds like good treatment of prisoners, Zethkai said carefully. It was, Krixta replied. But while they were helping our wounded soldiers, they were also planting tiny tracking devices on them. Devices so small that our medical scanners could not detect them. When we released the treated prisoners back to our forces, the humans knew exactly where our command posts, supply depots, and medical stations were located. The human medic named Danny Walsh had personally treated over 40 coalition wounded during the battle. Every single one of those soldiers had been released back to coalition forces with hidden trackers that transmitted locations for weeks afterward. The humans turned their own mercy into a weapon that gave them perfect intelligence about enemy movements. Captain Rodriguez demonstrated something that terrified all of us, Krixta continued. When her unit ran out of energy cell ammunition for their weapons, they did not retreat or surrender. Instead, they began making new weapons from mining equipment and farming tools. In less than an hour, they had created explosive devices that were more powerful than our military grenades. The human ability to adapt and improvise seemed unlimited. When their vehicles were destroyed, they used the wreckage to build fortified positions. When their communications were jammed, they developed hand signal systems that worked perfectly in combat. When their original battle plan failed, they created new plans in minutes that worked even better than the first one. Every time we thought we had gained an advantage, the humans found a way to turn it against us, Krixta said. When we captured one of their weapon storage areas, we discovered that they had left the weapons behind on purpose. The storage area was actually a trap, filled with explosives that killed an entire company of our best soldiers. The most frightening discovery came when coalition intelligence officers examined captured human equipment. Everything the humans used was designed to be repaired, modified, or turned into something else. Their tools could become weapons, their vehicles could be converted into mobile fortresses, and their civilian buildings could be transformed into military strongholds in a matter of hours. Near the end of the first day, I was hiding in a damaged coalition transport, Krixta said. I watched a human engineer named Maya Patel teach a group of teenage humans how to build rocket launchers from water pipes and agricultural chemicals. These were children, some of them barely old enough to be considered adults by human standards, but they learned to make military weapons like they had been doing it their whole lives. Commander Zethkai felt sick as he listened to this story. The idea of children building weapons was horrifying to most coalition species, but the humans seemed to think it was perfectly normal. The teenagers were laughing while they worked, Krixta added quietly. They treated weapon construction like it was a fun school project. They competed with each other to see who could build the most effective launcher, and they celebrated when their homemade rockets destroyed our armored vehicles.